Hello everybody, Toastmom here. Today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and asking about your thoughts about what you thought about the Global Championship that just happened with Halo, the 500,000 crazy tournament where Ace won $200,000 for getting first place, and that was really awesome. Now, first of all, this is also a crazy gameplay where I was like, man, I just want to try to get as many points in a game as possible. So I thought about a playlist, and I'm like, Dominion. That new lockdown game type is crazy, and I bet you I can get a bunch of points. So this is the most points I've actually got in a single game in Halo 4 ever. So, anyways, Global Championship. Now, I thought this was such an awesome tournament. Not only was the production value there, the money was there, the players were there, and it was intense and awesome, so that inherently just made it a great tournament. But the way it was run was really great, and the things they chose to add into it were perfect. Initially, I thought it was a little odd, you know, they got the musical numbers, and then they have some of the things on the side of the screen that I personally don't really care too much about, like the technical model of the gun, like the DMR HC7 or whatever like that. But really, it was great that it was there because it made it so that there was something for everyone. I was curious while I was on there. I'm like, man, I don't really care too much about this stuff. I just care about the people playing. But I was curious, so I went on Twitter and I was just watching the new things that people were talking about for the hashtag or whatever scroll by. And while there was some people, like during the musical stuff and stuff like that, that were like, music, just watch the game, like that, there were other people who identified with those people because they knew about those people, or that they identified with the red versus blue bits that were going on, and they thought that stuff was awesome because they're like, okay, I don't really know much about competitive Halo, but hey, I know this is something that I know, and they're able to identify with all that stuff and really connect. So it created this really great mix that allowed for everybody, not only just the competitive people, to be able to watch and be able to relate to something. So that ended up being actually really awesome, and then after I think about it more, I'm like, wow, that is genius. That is really great that they allowed for everybody to have an equal opportunity to relate to something. So I thought that was a really smart thing for 343 or Microsoft or whoever put this stuff together and made all those decisions to put these various bits and things in there in between the games. It was a really smart decision, and I really like that. Now, really the only thing I can say that was bad about the tournament was that some of the graphics on the screen were good, like they're awesome, but there was some information missing a lot of the time that would be nice to have there all the time, like the player name that you're watching on screen, because up until just the last few matches, they didn't even have the player names. They just had like Xbox One or some code name with like 001, 002, 003 after it. So you didn't even know who you were watching, and the only time you saw the player name is when they brought up that little thing on the side that either showed the leaderboard or showed what weapon they're using, stuff like that. So that was kind of annoying because half the time in the 8-player ones, you didn't know what was going on. It wasn't so bad in the 1v1s because the commentators were good enough talking about who was actually on screen at the time, and it was easy enough because it's just 2 people, so it's flipping back and forth, so you could kind of follow along with that. But when it came to 8 people, it really wasn't easy to follow at all, and I half the time didn't even know who I was watching. So I think that could be improved, but everything else was really well executed and done really well, and I loved that. And then also this tournament and how it was run sort of shows something about Halo 5 in the future and their shift in focus, whether it's genuine or not. And what I mean by that is a lot of times publishers tell game companies to do a certain thing because they're like, okay, well, we're putting all this money into it, we're putting out the game for you guys, so we have a few requests. So we want you to have this and have this and have this, and it's not always something the developer actually wants. It's exactly like how a few years ago, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, do you remember that time where every single-player game that was supposed to be basically single-player focused all of a sudden miraculously had a really crappy multiplayer that was slapped in there for no reason and felt completely shoehorned in and was terrible? Well, that was because the publisher said, hey, we want multiplayer because Call of Duty is doing really well and we want a chunk of that. We want to get those people into this game. So what the developer did was like, okay, we really don't want to. We just want to spend all our time on the single player, which is what we're actually interested in. So we're going to slap together in like a day and a half, well, probably more than that. But we're just going to slap together this crappy multiplayer so we can have more time to work on the thing we actually care about. And just do it so we're able to check off this box that says multiplayer next to it that the publisher gave us. So that's sort of my concern with this whole esports focus that everyone's going towards, because the publishers are seeing that League of Legends is doing so super awesome. They're making billions of dollars or whatever on heroes. So they're thinking, oh, esports, okay, that's the new thing, and now we have to tell the publishers, okay, we need a spectator mode, we need blah blah blah, and then they might just slap that stuff together, and then it makes a worse experience in the end because they had to spend all this time on this unnecessary stuff. But the thing about this time around, as opposed to the time when multiplayer was the thing for single-player games, is that with multiplayer and single-player, those are completely separate things that are unrelated to each other altogether. So if you make a multiplayer, that's not going to improve the single-player. But the thing about the multiplayer is, if you have a multiplayer that's still good, and even if you have kind of a slap-together spectator mode that's at least functional, that at least goes hand in hand with the multiplayer and can improve that experience. So I think that might actually be a good thing, even if it wasn't on, say, the Halo 5 development checklist initially, if it got added on to there later, and now they're required to have a spectator mode because of Microsoft, assuming it is like that and they weren't already planning on having something like that. But if it is like that, and it's put together fairly well to be functional at least, I think that still improves the multiplayer, as opposed to having two completely unrelated things. And Halo is so big that in Halo's case, they can just throw more money at it, they can hire more people to make that stuff for them and make those checkboxes get checked off and have it actually produced really well. So I think that is actually an improvement for Halo if that is some sort of requirement by Microsoft to have that. Which it seems like it very may well be, because you look at this thing like the Global Championship and the tournaments run by Microsoft that they're planning to do in the future. This is clearly some sort of shift, and they're definitely pushing for the whole esports thing. So I'm assuming they're going to require their games to have some sort of esports-friendly type features that they can throw on the front of the box or whatever. But it sort of worries me about slightly smaller games. Obviously, there's not as many of those. It's kind of just the indie and the AAA nowadays. But there are some still kind of smaller sort of AAA games, and I worry that that's going to mess with those developers and potentially ruin some awesome multiplayer games because they had to spend a bunch of time on some sort of spectator mode and something like that. So I'm kind of worried about that for the future of those games, potentially ruining them because of development time and cost and stuff like that. But I think it's actually an improvement for Halo because they have so much money, they have so many people developing it, that they can just hire more and throw more money and be able to get something that's actually really good. So I think that's actually a hopeful thing for the future for Halo 5, is that we're likely to have really esports friendly things, because you think about, dude, if there was a spectator mode, how much easier, A, would that tournament that they just put on, like, they just experienced it firsthand, having to set up all these TVs, all these computers. If they had a spectator mode, maybe they still would have done the same setup because it probably has more flexibility, but still, it would have been way better and way easier if that was natively supported by the game. And then local tournaments, it would be so much easier. They wouldn't have all this equipment that costs thousands of dollars. They would literally need a few Xboxes, and that is it. If I had enough Xboxes, I could throw a tournament. That's how easy something like a Call of Duty Black Ops 2 tournament would be to run, because it's so easy to set up. So anyways, those are my thoughts about the Global Championship. I thought it was awesome. Congratulations to Ace. That is super cool, because he's always been one of those players that hasn't been super talked about, obviously because of the Elamite Warrior being his brother and all, and him having the more successful story or whatever in his Halo career. So congratulations to him. It was super awesome. Very, very intense coming down to that tiebreaker match. Oh man, that was crazy. And also, I think it can actually be a good thing, this shift, this esports focus from the publishers, for Halo, but I think it could also be potentially devastating to some slightly smaller games in the future. But anyways, that'll be it for this one. If you haven't seen the Global Championship, I kind of spoiled it for you, but you should watch it anyways, at least that last day from going from the quarterfinals to the finals, I think is what it was. You should at least watch that because there were some great games, there was some awesome plays, and just really exciting Halo overall. So anyways, that'll be it. See you later. Bye.